Good morning. It's time again. It's Sunday. Time for the, what did I do with the Humanists of Greater Portland Sunday meeting. I'm Pete Barquette, your MC for today. And now I can read my script. Welcome everyone here at Friendly House and on Zoom and all the ships at seas. HGP believes strongly in freedom of speech, but the views expressed by myself, our reader, today's speaker, HGP members, and our guests at today's meeting are not the official views of the Humanists of Greater Portland. Our reader today is Anand Atre.
Thank you, Pete. That was loud. You had it loud, I had it loud. Good morning, everyone. Today's reading is a short poem by Rabindranath Tagore. Brief background on the author. Tagore was an Indian poet. He was born in 1861 in Bengal, and he died in 1941. He's the first non-white person to win the Nobel Prize in any category, and the second non-European to win the Nobel Prize in literature. He's well known for denouncing Britain's oppressive colonial rule over India. The context of this poem is that it was written in 1910 during British colonial rule. It is tied to India's struggle for freedom, social reform, and Tagore's vision of an enlightened society. Although the poem is dated, I'm hoping many of its themes continue to resonate given the current state of affairs around the world. And with that, I give you Tagore's poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear. Where the mind is without fear, and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic wars, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Thank you very much.
Okay, humanism is an approach to life based on reason and our common humanity, recognizing that moral values are properly founded on human nature and experience alone. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. She's co-director and co-founder of Ground Score Association and works as the Advocacy Coordinator for the International Alliance of Waste Pickers. She has worked at the nexus of waste reduction, job creation, and social inclusion for more than a decade as a project manager, organizer, dumpster diver, and artist. Please welcome Taylor Cass Talbott.
Can you hear me all right? All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here this morning. I always grab at a chance to come to Friendly House. I went to preschool here. It was my first volunteering that I did on my own. It was in middle school at the preschool. And I'm a longtime sister-like friend of Maya Chamberlain, who's the current ED. So it's really nice to be back in the hood. Well, today I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Ground Score Association, which is our local organization. But before I share my screen and my face gets really small for all of those online, I'm gonna maybe just give a little bit of background information to how I got here, because I am homegrown Portlander, as is probably obvious, being a Friendly House kid. And I grew up doing a lot of dumpster diving frequently with my dad. We dumpster dived a lot in this neighborhood in the industrial Northwest. Those businesses and dumpsters have changed a lot. You find them a lot more locked these days. But my grandfather also was kind of famous for just metal scrapping any cans or that he would find. He was from Washington State, so that's a state without a bottle bill. So he was really just collecting metals for scrapping. And I think it was in our blood. So my dad would always just do that as for side income. He was one of the first people I knew selling on eBay. He would, if he found a dumpster full of something, I think he's still selling like grommets and zippers that he dumpster dived in that neighborhood in the industrial area from decades ago. I still, I remember there was one dumpster completely filled with zippers, and we still use those to this day, even at ground score. So we had this ethic of dumpster diving, and it, was something that was of interest, but it wasn't like a career path necessarily for me. I went to Lincoln High School. I turned out to be really good with languages. And so my jobs out of college, I went to University of Oregon, minored in Spanish, and my jobs out of college tended to be in interpretation. I worked for court-appointed attorneys. I worked for years in the medical clinic of Outside In, where I was working with the houseless community. And then for fun, I would go out at night and I would dumpster dive or pick through people's recyclable bins and collect materials. I got really into making crafts with upcycled materials. My family is a lot of artists and artisans in my family. And so, in my spare time, I started to make things, jewelry and whatnot, and sell them, mostly street vending, Alberta Street Fair kind of places, and was really interested in that, but I had no idea how to make a career of it. So I started organizing just little exhibits in the clinic at Outside In, and actually there was even an exhibit at Friendly House at one point. We just kind of go around to different social service organizations, exhibits of things that our clients and customers at Outside In were bringing in. If I saw that they were clearly a waste picker, right? Somebody who is kind of collecting trash materials and upcycling it, and other artists. So I was trying to just create spaces for different types of artisans and artists to come together, but really looking at the issue of waste. And so through those, I really learned organizing skills. I, started a website called Live Debris, and just to feature it and just figuring out like, how can I make this my job? But I really didn't know how to, and I really wasn't making very much money off of it. At one point, I quit my job in the city and I moved off the grid up to Washington and was making stuff, and I would come back to the city and sell. But again, I really didn't know how to make a career of it. I eventually applied for a Rotary Peace Fellowship. It's an amazing program. They pay for your master's program somewhere in the world. That's how I met Leslie in the back there. And that totally changed my world and opened up a lot of doors for me. I ended up moving to Tokyo for 2 years. I studied peace studies, but within that, really looking at the issue of waste and social inclusion and exclusion. I was able to get an internship in the Kingdom of Bhutan, where I looked at the ways that sanitation campaigns like changed the way that people perceive the poor, and ended up getting hired by the local organization in Bhutan, mostly training and cooperative development and upcycling. So I was actually able to I spent almost 5 years in Bhutan, really just developing craft techniques, learning craft techniques, finding ways to apply waste materials to those techniques. But eventually, I wanted to make more than $100 a month. At some point, in my 30s, I was like, okay, I might need a retirement at some point. But I was also interested in organizing. Like I started to become exposed to waste picker organizing. This is something that exists around the world. You don't hear about it a lot in our part of the world, but in places like India, where they have a very strong national movement, they have trade unions, cooperatives dedicated to this work. Brazil, Argentina, some of the places that I had, traveled to mostly on vacation when I was like in my work career as an interpreter. I started to see the ways that people are being organized and recognizing that they're really not organized here. And so while I was in Bhutan, I applied. I worked with some of the Rotary clubs here in Oregon, as well as in India, and applied for a global grant and my husband and I were able to get funding to spend a year in Western India in Pune, which is home to the oldest waste picker trade union in India, one of the oldest in the world, called the KKPKP trade union, and they're cooperative. And so I mostly helped them with communications campaigns related to, trying to get consumers or households to wrap their sanitary waste. And yeah, I had an incredible experience, and I learned that's one of the few cooperatives in the world that has municipal contracts to provide the services that they provide. And they specifically are providing, one of the things that they provide is waste collection services in like what they call slum communities, right? Really low income communities. And so far today, the only two waste picker organizations that I know of that have municipal contracts to provide waste collection services in really low income communities are Swatch in India, and now Ground Score in Portland. So as you can tell, I learned a lot. And 2017, 18, I decided to move back home to Portland. I've got, nieces and nephews growing up, aging parents. So I thought, well, we'll move home and see what we can do there. But when I landed here, I really didn't know what I was going to do. My 8 years abroad didn't seem to be very impressive on my resume here in Portland. People were like, well, you haven't been here for a long time and the city's changed a lot. It's like, fair. So I was like, well, there's can and bottle collectors all over this city. So I started just organizing, really reaching out, asking people questions, following them on their routes. And eventually, was able to meet enough people who were interested in maybe organizing something. And so we started, I guess maybe now's the time to share the screen. Let me try to figure this out here. What's that? Upcycling, yeah. Different from recycling. You're usually making it into have a different purpose. Yeah, so eventually this very informal type of organizing that we were doing evolved into the establishment of Ground Score Association. And we started just collectively organizing, and we were always just trying to bring it back to like a democratic process. So we had a very participatory democratic process to create our logo, to create a mission. What do we want to do? And that evolved into our mission. We are an association of informal recyclers, canners, dumpster divers, and other waste pickers who create and fill low barrier waste management jobs in Portland. We're collectively organized. We consider ourselves radically inclusive, prioritizing work opportunities for those facing work and housing insecurity. And we seek to build a more environmentally and socially aware community while also changing society's perceptions of what and who is considered valuable. And yeah, I mean, in the early days, this was like 2019, primarily 2019, early parts of 2020. We were just like meeting monthly. St. Francis Community Center it's the apartments now there, have a little community room so we could meet indoors once a month and just see who would show up. And yeah, engage people. And like over time, we were getting more and more people. We started to get some gigs doing like event waste management at street fairs or here and there, but it was like very much here and there. And it was like, okay, so we're just trying to find, semi-formal or more scheduled, more opportunities for folks whose primary livelihood generally is collecting cans and bottles, dumpster diving too, but it's much easier to make income off of cans and bottles these days. And then the pandemic happened and it totally turned our world upside down. And, we thought it was going to be really devastating for us because so many of the people in our community were living outside and really didn't have a lot of resources. But actually the pandemic ended up bringing a ton of opportunity our way for a couple of reasons. One was that, let me see what I have next on the, yeah, let me go backwards. Oops. One was that the state stopped enforcing the bottle bill. So I don't know if you remember during peak pandemic, if you haven't completely blocked that era from your mind, but it was really, really hard to find places to take your cans and bottles. All the grocery stores were like, great, we never wanted to take your cans and bottles anyway. Go find someplace else to take them. And so it was very hard. So the city of Portland actually stepped in and helped fund us to operate a can and bottle depot, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the other thing that happened during the pandemic was that they stopped sweeping homeless camps. And so you saw camps get rather large and a lot of waste accumulated around them for a few reasons. One is that people were far more dependent on disposables because a lot of the soup kitchens closed. People just generally, they needed to be able to take their food and take it wherever they were going. The other reason is that, a lot of times when there is waste in the streets, the labor that is used to collect those materials oftentimes tends to either be, volunteers, maybe mobilized through like Solve or some of these kind of volunteer engagement types of organizations, or prison labor, actually, quite frankly, sometimes earning maybe $1 a day to go and collect waste in the streets or on highways. And our question was, well, clearly this is an essential service. We were seeing camps fill up with so much waste, and including food matter, that there would be like hundreds of rats. And we had a massive Shigella outbreak in the streets. It was really, really unsanitary conditions. And the human right to a healthy environment is just that, it's a human right. And so we said this is an essential service, and people should be paid to do it. And so the city of Portland actually contracted us to start providing those services. That's our glitter program. And we essentially began employing people, including formally, right? So bringing people onto payroll with benefits, to provide waste collection services for folks living outside. And currently today we have routes all across the city. We engage people a couple of different ways. To remain really, really low barrier, we have pickups, what are called pickup shifts. So you can show up at our Old Town warehouse. We're right on the corner of Cooch and Broadway. You can show up at 8:30 in the morning, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'll do like random number lottery to select, a few people usually is all we really have funding for pickup shifts. Yesterday, I think we had 50 some people in our warehouse looking for work. People really want work and, they don't have it. So it's a big need. But what that does is it enables you to work for us. You don't need an ID. You don't need to bring anything. You just need to show up. You need to be, sober and able to do the job safely. And we'll take you out in the field and then we'll pay you cash. And then we also have our ranks, of course, of payroll employees. So if you show up, you keep showing consistency, you're doing a good job, then we'll help you get onto payroll. And sometimes, well, usually that involves helping you get an ID, helping you get some form of identification to legally work. And then from there, we try to really meet people where they're at. So we understand that a lot of the folks, especially who are out there collecting cans and bottles, have pretty significant barriers to formal employment. There's a reason that they need flexibility, whether they have, home care responsibilities, whether they have, fluctuating mental and physical health. For a lot of, whether they are unhoused and just generally really unstable, it's very hard to hold down a job when you're worried about your stuff during the day, or if you're afraid to go into shelters for whatever reason. So we really try to meet people where they're at. And we also really try to build the kind of trust with our membership and with our workers to keep them coming back. Because a lot of times people also fail at formal work, frankly, because some small thing can break their trust, right? If they have a manager who's a little bit too heavy-handed, or, maybe they also, they're not going to fit very well working for a big corporation, right? They don't want to kind of feed the beast of American capitalism, but it's very hard to find meaningful jobs. So I think there's a lot of reasons that can kind of cause somebody to, and they may regret it later, but leave the job and never come back. And so we really try to build the kind of trust and community with our folks to prevent that from happening. We're membership based. If you are a waste picker, you can be a member, and the membership opens you up to trainings. You're allowed to participate in most of our trainings that we provide. It also allows you to vote in our quarterly general assemblies. And we try to have the policies that really affect our workers be voted on and passed and written by them so that they have some ownership in it. So all of our attendance policies, our drug and alcohol policies, those are policies that our workers have created and voted on, so that if an incident does happen, we can just say, well, either you created this policy or you didn't show up to vote on it, or, maybe it will encourage them to get more involved in the participatory process too, if they see that, okay, that policy isn't working for me. We also have an elected workers council. So every 2 years, our membership elects a 5-person body of, you can't be anything higher than a coordinator. And that's the body that acts a little bit like a board, but they're the ones who really help facilitate the writing of policies, facilitation of our general assemblies, and making sure that the direction that we're going is rooted in the needs and desires of our membership. And then we are a 501c3 nonprofit, even so we look more like a cooperative, but legally we're registered as a nonprofit. So we also have a board of directors that is selected by our workers' council and that works very closely with them. So back to our programming, I'll give just kind of an overview of some of our programs, and I do want to leave plenty of time for questions today. Our glitter program, currently we have city contracts, county contracts. We work for some of the enhanced service districts like Go Lloyd, or the Lloyd ESD, I guess it's called. Probably going to start some routes as well in St. John's area. We've had some small contracts with like Habara Shalom and some of the other private entities, really just to make sure that waste is getting picked up off the street. And also, if there are camps, especially if there are camps that are consistently there, we try to actually provide a service to them. So we get to know who's in the camp. We ask them, we give them bags. We'll come back a couple of days later and collect your waste, so that it's more of like a waste collection service before any of that waste is going to end up in the street or end up burned or however it is that they're managing it. This program was a lot easier to implement during the pandemic when they weren't sweeping camps all the time, because it was very easy for us to continue to go back and find the same people. And it's a lot less time consuming when somebody's bagging up their waste and handing it to you, as opposed to being in a camp and maybe getting swept. And then, generally when a campsite gets swept, rapid response or whoever it is, they'll take the belongings and store them for a certain amount of time. But then the rest of the waste gets left, and it can look really, really messy. And so, we will clean those sites, and we'll also do like micro trash cleaning. In fact, the mayor just won a big award. He was in DC last week to receive it. Really for our program in micro trash cleaning, things like cigarette butts, right? I mean, you see them there, they don't really seem like that big a deal, but actually they're filled with toxic chemicals. And when they're meeting with the environment, that's the kind of stuff that gets into our waterways. So even though it's a really small material, it doesn't constitute a lot of weight, but it's really hazardous for the environment. And so, not only do we do the work, but we really also get involved in the policy behind recycling and waste world. Because, well, not only because of the bottle bill, which does affect our workers, but there's an increase in these types of policies called extended producer responsibilities, which is making the producers of products more responsible for what they're producing and the end of life of those materials. And so, we try to kind of push for more responsibility from these companies to actually have to resolve the materials when they end up as waste. Otherwise, we as taxpayers pay for it, through all kinds of taxes. So that's our glitter program. We collect a lot of waste. We've consistently been able to renew our contracts, as we do a pretty darn good job. Most of our crews go out on foot or on the bus, or now we also have a fleet of electric trucks. Let's see if I have. We divert a ton of materials for recycling. Most of what you find in the street, it's not as recyclable as necessarily what we're generating in the household, but a lot of it is, and there's a lot of cardboard out there, and actually the majority of what we find are textiles, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but you can see in this picture, it is a lot of textiles, right? And this is a particularly, bad camp that was abandoned in terms of waste, but we do occasionally, in fact, just on Friday, we cleaned up a camp very similar to this. I think we pulled 6,000 pounds of waste out of there. And we engage a lot of individuals. In 2005 alone, we engaged 11,000 people. So we're really, frankly, it's not that hard to engage that many people, because there's, 7,000 to 8,000 people currently living in the streets. The homelessness rate in the city is increasing dramatically. We really don't have a handle on it. And, we do need to be able to provide those services for a lot of reasons. But we also look for other opportunities. I guess just to close on the glitter program, we also have a fleet of electric tricycles. And what that allows us to do is, one, not use as much carbon when we're going around and collecting, but it also has enabled us to start what's called a bagless, we call it our bagless waste collection program. So, a plastic bag is a petroleum product. It might have been produced in a foreign country. It might have been shipped, halfway across the world to get processed and back across the world to get turned into a bag and then back to the United States. And then its lifespan is about 10 minutes. So we were wondering, how can we collect waste without using that plastic bag to begin with? And so we started our bagless waste program. It's a little bit more labor intensive, but we find that the cost savings from not using the plastic bags covers the additional cost of labor, so we can spend that money on humans rather than on the oil industry. And yeah, essentially we put a tarp in our e-trikes, our electric trikes, and then people use, really, they're just the IKEA reusable. Those blue bags tend to be the best. They hold about the right amount of waste. And so when they're collecting waste, it goes in there and then they dump it into the trike, and then it goes from the trike into our trailer and then to the transfer station. And so, yeah, we've been able to collect a pretty significant portion of the waste that we collect, at least in the downtown, inner city area that is easy to access by trikes, completely without using disposable plastic bags. We also have done a pretty good job of measuring our impact. The city of Portland in end of 2024, they did a study about our glitter program to understand what its impact on our workers is. Right now, we have about 45 people on payroll just for our glitter program. And what they found was that, the majority of folks, when they started working for Ground Score, were unhoused, mostly completely unsheltered. And about 71% of that total workforce is currently housed. And then of those workers who were sleeping in tents when they came to us, 100% of them are now in temporary or permanent housing. And 55% of all of those, who improved their situation directly attribute it to working for Ground Score. And this wasn't really something that we set out to do. I mean, we don't try to judge people on their housing circumstances. Obviously, it's easier for them to be more regular workers when they are housed in general. But I think what we found was that, having an income and being able to prove that income dramatically increases your ability to be eligible for subsidized housing. But we also found that just having a regular job and a community that's like healthy and like welcoming you every day and a reason to get up in the morning, to have a safe place to leave your belongings, like that was enough to incentivize people to take that step a lot of times. And we see that more and more. I mean, the majority of our payroll workers, almost all actually are housed and, fairly stably housed, mostly with some amount of subsidization, but a lot of them without as well. And they're really proud of that. And a lot of, most of our workers too, never had a bank account, didn't have ID, a lot of those things that can become pretty significant barriers to housing, getting a job, all the things that, make us feel productive in society. We've also seen from this program pretty dramatic improvements in health. And it's not just that it's like an outdoor job where you're walking a lot, and those trike riders are in really, really good shape. So that helps obviously with your physical and mental health. But we've seen like pretty dramatic declines in substance use disorder, because of working with us, and probably also combined with getting into housing. I think we see that kind of triangle of like housing, work, and substance use. They really complement each other in trying to help people overcome addiction. 81% of workers report health improvements. And the percentage of workers who report struggling with drug abuse went from 48 to 12, and they directly attributed that to working for Ground Score. So we were pretty surprised. We're like, okay, this is really working. And I guess for this reason, a lot of our contracts that we get actually do come under, homelessness services. Rather than the recycling industry, it's actually really homelessness services money, because we see that it has direct impacts on housing. So that's our glitter program. Next is the People's Depot. Has anybody heard of our People's Depot before? So this is our bottle depot. It's currently located under the Morrison Bridge in Southeast Portland. It's Southeast MLK and Morrison. People have a lot of strong feelings about can and bottle collectors. I don't know if y'all take your cans and bottles back, or like, I don't know, raise your hand if you have a canner who comes by and maybe takes your cans and bottles for you. Yeah. I don't know if you know that person's name or if you have a relationship with them, but I think a lot of people do in town. I definitely know mine. I save my cans for her, I invite her for dinner sometimes. And that's sort of the idea behind the People's Depot, is really giving visibility and validity to folks who collect cans and bottles as their income, usually as their primary source of income. So the People's Depot also started out of the pandemic, like I said, when they stopped enforcing the bottle bill. And it was really hard to find places to take your cans and bottles. And the city of Portland was concerned about that. We don't have real data on how many people are depending on cans and bottles for their livelihood, but we know it's a lot. And people were already losing their jobs during the pandemic. So the city of Portland funded us to start our own depot, which we called the People's Depot. We've experimented with a lot of different locations. We've been in St. John's, out at the Peninsula Crossing Trail. We were under the Steel Bridge for a while. We were over, they had like temporary camps set up in Southeast Portland. And we finally landed under MLK and Morrison, like literally under the bridgehead. We process 10 million containers a year. I think I have some numbers here. Well, let me bring it back so you can see the pictures. We've been, this last year and the year before, we processed about 10 million containers, meaning cans and bottles, which is really, really significant for a depot that's only open for 2.5 hours a day. We are handing thousands of dollars in cash out of a fanny pack under that bridge. And we're sorting cans and bottle and kiddie pools. So when you look at it, you're like, what is this operation even doing? But we started to attract a lot of interest and attention in our work because we're incredibly efficient and very successful. Our depot, it was initially, like I said, funded by the city of Portland. But then after about a year, they looked to the distributors who are represented under the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative. You may know them because they operate the bottle drop facilities around the state. So then the OBRC started to fund us. And so now we're currently funded exclusively by the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative. But like I said, increasingly grocery stores don't really want to take your cans and bottles. They never really did want to take them. And during the pandemic in particular, and with the rise since 2019, we've had a pretty significant increase in fentanyl addiction in our streets. You're probably very aware. It's a very visible kind of addiction. It's not one where you're maybe gonna like slump down in a corner and nobody really notices you, but you might be like doubled over looking really, high. And so I think that combination of having like a very visible drug addiction in the streets combined with increased homelessness, the retailers started getting some additional power to lobby to not have to take cans and bottles, and particularly those retailers in downtown Portland. And so the retailers got together with the distributors last year to pass an amendment to the bottle bill that essentially gives independent depots like ours, which normally don't have any financial incentive to exist in the system, except if we can, get some donations from the distributors. It actually gives us a right to exist as kind of like a bottle drop facility. And so this year we have been working with them to find a different site in Southeast Portland. It's going to be an indoor site, a warehouse. We won't have to be working under the bridge anymore. We'll be able to have like normal bathrooms for our staff and place to wash our hands. And we'll be able to expand from a 2.5 hour a day depot to a 5 or 6 hour a day depot to really be able to provide decent work for our workers. Our workers, this depot is exclusively run by canners. So these are folks, most of whom started coming to our depot to sell cans and bottles, and eventually made their way onto payroll with us. And we have really, really good job retention in this program. It's kind of rough work, like you're counting for hours on end, and we're seeing about a person a minute. And so in our shift, we're seeing 160 up to 180 people in that 2.5 hour shift sometimes. So it's really a lot of people, almost completely can and bottle collectors who are coming to us. It's really become a strong community space. We really know the people, our team, they know almost every single person who's coming. Now we're starting to get like more families and kind of neighborhood people, but we really know our community very, very well. But it's hard work. You're out in the weather and in the elements, but we very rarely do we lose a worker because they find this work to be really validating. It's not a lot of places you can go where can and bottle collectors are lifted up rather than denigrated as, homeless drug addicts. That stereotype that is absolutely false. The other thing that the depot has enabled us to do is to survey our customer base, because like I said, there's like almost no research out there about can and bottle collectors in this country. And so that's helped us learn a little bit more. And what we found, for example, we did this study last year. 2/3 of our customers grew up in poverty. Just 55% of them are unhoused, and that's different from when we started. When we started, it was almost 100%. So we've got like definitely a more diverse mix of customers coming through. And I think, more of our customers have gotten into housing. 60% of them have zero other form of income. So they're completely dependent on can and bottle collecting. And yeah, 70% of them face mental and some type of mental or physical disability. It's really not surprising. I will say too, a lot of them, the majority would rather be doing something else. But the reality is that there really aren't a lot of other types of jobs. If you go to countries that are far more dependent on what's called the informal economy, where things like street vending is more legal, there are markets where you can do market vending. There's more prevalence of home-based work. There's more manufacturing, so there's more kind of lower barrier types of jobs in the economy. That's a little bit of a different story, but here, there really aren't that many of those kinds of jobs. But just because a country or an economy like develops, it doesn't mean that the need for those types of low barrier jobs goes away. It just means that oftentimes those people stop looking for jobs, or they fall into work like this, and have a pretty significant contribution to the recycling stream. If you put your can and bottle in your curbside recycling bin, it's really convenient, but that's a mixed recycling bin. So that's going to go maybe to a material recovery facility, and that can and bottle might get pulled out and put in, a scrap bin for recycling, or it might get flattened with a paper bale and sent to Asia or someplace and get burned because it's not in the right bale, or not recycled at all, or it might end up in the environment. So, whereas if it's a bottle bill material, those materials come pre-sorted, right? If somebody picks that bottle recycling, out of your recycling bin, they're sorting it into PET plastic bottles, aluminum, and glass. And so when it comes to our depot, it's perfectly sorted. So it's much easier and more affordable for there to be a domestic end market for those materials. So 100% of the materials that come through Oregon's bottle bill system, rather than the curbside recycling bin, are actually recycled domestically here in the United States. And if you've been following recycling policy issues at all over the last 10 years, you will know that there's not a lot of stuff being recycled in our country right now. And not a lot of, plastics even, for example, that are even being recycled at all. So, the bottle bill is really important for improving recycling outcomes. I think last year there was like a 90-some% return rate. So 90% of the materials going out into the market are coming back into the recycling system, not ending up in the environment, not ending up in a foreign country, in a wrong bale or something like that. So we know that it's pretty impactful, the bottle bill. But we definitely see that with the increase in homelessness, with the increase of fentanyl addiction, there's been increasing calls to abolish the bottle bill because people claim that this is creating income for people to go and use to spend on drugs. There's really no data behind that. States that pass a bottle bill actually tend to see an 11% decline in petty crime. And what that tells you is that if somebody is truly addicted, I wish that it were that easy. If you could just take money away, then like addiction would go away, but that's not really how it works. So yeah, people need cash, and they need cash not just for that kind of thing, but the vast majority of what people are spending their income on are basic essentials. So we also surveyed that question. Food and water, paying bills, transportation, medication. Cigarettes also is interestingly a high percentage, but a really small minority is actually using that income on drugs. But some percentage certainly is using it on drugs, and so I think that's all the more important, or that's the reason that it's all the more important to have some organizing happening among this community, right? That community of support, like we've seen with our Glitter program, that when you have a community of support built up, that's how people are able to confront things like drug addiction. And so that's really the objective of the People's Depot, is to create a community of care, essentially. And the fact that our depot is run completely by canners, makes it that much more valid, because people come and they're immediately validated because the person who's across the sorting table, really understands their reality, and, they can have a conversation where they understand each other. I want to hop backwards a couple points and just point out that Chris, who's holding the People's Depot sign, he's our manager. When he came to us, he was living under a bridge. He'd been working as a canner for several years. He was born in a foreign country. He was an Army kid. And so he actually didn't have ID. It took him a number of years to even get ID. But he is one of the most brilliant people. I feel really, really honored. I mean, I technically manage him, but I don't need to do much. Like, this guy is really, really good. He manages all the budgets. He manages all the people, the logistics. He's the most reliable person I know. Like, he's amazing. He has a bank account, an apartment. Like, he's got, we set up retirement accounts for people. Like, we have seen how transformative this work can be if the opportunity is given. And so, yeah, we're increasingly always trying to get more money for our depot and for our glitter program so that we can expand these opportunities to other people. Can you remind me, we're going till 11:10? Perfect. We have a couple of other programs that are a little bit smaller. One is our storage program. We have county funding to provide day storage for up to 15 people. In Old Town, it tends to get nearly full every day. This allows people, to go to a job, go to a day shelter, or go places where they can't take their belongings. And that's also been really essential for us because it funds a position on the floor who can be there to always receive folks. And that now allows us to keep our door really pretty open. So, we have a lot of people come through ground school who just need something, like, I just need to charge my phone real quick, or, we have now a relationship with Portland State University where they're sending social work interns to us who literally just come multiple times a week, and they sit and they help problem solve for people. Like, okay, let me try to problem solve housing. Let me help you get your ID, all the things that social workers do. That's been really transformational because a lot of people in the community know us and they know to come to us. And it's kind of unusual to have an organization that has their doors, open, where if you really need something. We've had people in crisis. We found a man who had been pushed over and had his wheelchair stolen from him out front of our door. I mean, things like you can't even imagine are occurring in the streets. And yeah, it's really pretty empowering for folks to be able to, not just kind of be like giving handouts to their community, but actually feel like they can help their community. Because if you don't have that opportunity, it's incredibly disempowering. It's very easy to get quite depressed about the state of the world. So the storage public program has been pretty transformational for us because of that staff position. We also have what's called the Wash House. This was piloted by the city of Portland starting in 2024. And we have just a small laundry facility kind of near the Clinton Triangle area of Southeast Portland. And we started this program because when we started doing audits of the waste we were collecting in the street, we were finding that 20% of it is just textiles. And that's the largest share of any single type of material, is just textiles. And when you're looking at it, like, these are clothes, 99% of them are perfectly wearable. Like, this is like, textiles are becoming like the next single-use plastic, really, also, because most of it is plastics. Because there's just so much more textiles coming, right? I mean, it's just fast fashion has made it so that textiles come and go from your life so easily that it's far more convenient and affordable for people to just discard them rather than launder them. Also, because laundry facilities are pretty expensive, these services. So we provide free services really for anybody who comes in. Recently, we've been seeing a lot more families with kids coming in, which has surprised us. I mean, we're in kind of an industrial area, but people are finding us. We also divert all the textiles that we collect on our routes for washing, sterilizing. Obviously, you don't want to like spread bed bugs or anything like that, and redistribution through a pretty extensive network of different social service organizations. Even Portland Street Response comes to us for things like blankets. The other type of funding, or the other type of the other source of materials that we have is through rapid response, which is tasked with campsite cleanups. And so, when they sweep a camp, they take and they store people's belongings for a certain amount of time. But if you don't go and claim those belongings, all of that stuff just goes straight to the landfill. And it's a pretty significant amount of material that's going to the landfill. So we are able to divert just the textile portion of it and launder it and redistribute it. So at least those objects and clothing are getting a new life. It's really significant amount of material right now. It's like about 5 tons of waste a month. And if you know anything about like greenhouse gas measurements, but textiles actually have like a really significant impact on greenhouse gas emissions. I think because a large portion of it is petroleum based. And I mean, even a cotton, if it's not organic or something, it's petroleum fertilizers that are being sprayed on them. So they're pretty carbon intensive material. And there's virtually no recycling end markets in this country. We really don't have a lot of policy regulating textiles. California finally passed a new law on textiles, extended producer responsibility for textiles. But outside of Europe, you really don't have a lot of policy regulating this stuff. So it's just either you're washing it for reuse or it's going to the landfill, or maybe you're sending it to get burned for energy somewhere, but there's no real good options. And I will say, even though we've been able to get funding for waste collection, for recycling, it has been very, very hard for us to get funding for reuse. So even though like society loves to talk about the circular economy and like we're moving towards more sustainability, I will tell you that on the ground of trying to actually fund that is very, very difficult still. And so that's for that reason we try to keep, our finger on the policy world to kind of be there and ready and to advocate constantly for that. Like we have very much struggled to fund this program. I think we found some funding to at least prevent us from having to shut it down. But like we were like a month ago, we were looking at like selling off the machines and just scrapping it, which is really sad when you see this program. Which is of course also a workforce development program, and is a pretty important type of job because most of our jobs are outdoors, and for folks, some of our folks really struggle to work outdoors all day. We really want to have more jobs for folks who might really need or benefit from being indoors during their shift. Our last program that I wanted to talk about is Ground Score Studios. Or Ground Score Association Studios, and this project started without really any funding. Well, actually, we got asked or invited by a local organization called DPAVE to make a shade covering from broken tents. Like I said, we divert a lot of textiles, but some textiles really can't be reused. And a lot of those textiles that we collect that can't be reused are, this outdoor material. So either from tents or athletic wear. It's a pretty easy material to sew. It doesn't fray. So it was like kind of a good way for our workers to like learn how to sew. And it looks really, really cool. This is a huge shade covering. I mean, it's like half the size of this room, shade covering of just broken tents. This July, they do their summer event every summer, DPAVE summer event on Southeast 7th and Sandy. And every year they hire us. Usually we have to fix it up a little bit every year because they put it out in the wind and the sun, and they like to leave it up for a month. So every year we need to kind of do some repairs to it. But you should be able to see it there again this summer. We have kind of a corner of our warehouse that is a storefront. It's like a gallery space. We turned it into a gallery space. And we have another little area where we've just created like an area where people can sew. We have some sewing machines there, make art for our creative members, because a lot of folks in our community are really creative. And I know from firsthand experience that having a skill like a craft or an art skill can really help buffer you from extreme poverty, right? Like if you can just always have that as a backup, I can just sell stuff. And also art is an important way to communicate. And a lot of our folks are suffering through a significant amount of trauma. And so, having an outlet like that to communicate is really important. So this year we were actually able to get, or I guess last year technically, funding from Plastic Solutions Fund is a funder. They really fund like social movement building kind of work. And so they funded us to hold monthly first Thursday gallery events in our gallery. They're still going, so you can come March 5th from 5 to 7, and it's really an organizing grant with the idea that the folks who are engaging in our studio, they know that every month they need to put on a show, but they have to decide what is the theme, who's going to contribute art, how are you going to display it, what do you want to say? And so, oftentimes the themes are related to something around environmental justice or economic justice. We had an exhibit at the beginning of this month the theme was fire. So kind of what lights your fire, trying to understand like what helps you rise up from the ashes. It was really interesting to hear what people's responses were. For March, it's going to be March Madness. It kind of came from the March Madness idea, but people really wanted to reflect on the ways that stereotype and that stigma of being insane or mad can kind of control power dynamics in society, that you can like very easily be canceled or outcast, if society considers you to be mad. And what constitutes madness is, pretty subjective. So that'll be the theme for March. And we've been finding, we have a ton of artists who've been showing their work, and we've actually like started to be able to sell work. Last month, we sold about $150 worth of stuff that went straight into the pockets of those workers. And the cool thing about that program is that this is like really low barrier work. You don't have to be able to show up to a scheduled shift. Even you could bring your stuff on the day of and sell it during the show. And that money goes straight to you. So that is this part of our objective of like finding kind of a diverse menu of the types of jobs so that we can match the need that's out there in the community. And yeah, we find a lot of these workers, are underemployed or unemployed, and can really benefit from having like a lower barrier bar to entry, and that will help them engage a little bit more with the community. The other interesting thing that this program does is, because we have a space where people can store their belongings, it's been pretty instructive for folks on like managing your things, which for our community can be challenging, right? Like as waste pickers, we tend to like see a lot of value in things, and folks are going out on like collection shifts too. They might be finding a lot of really interesting stuff. And you want to save it, and especially as artists, like you really want to save it and use it for something, or someday I can use it for something. I know this inclination very well, but it can make you a challenging roommate, right? It can be very it can be very difficult to like live and sustain indoors if your inclination is to accumulate. And so in this space, people have, a plastic bin, they have a designated area, and they have to manage that. And it doesn't always go that well. But, it's kind of about the community working together to be like, hey, can you clean up your area a little bit? And so, yeah, there's just like there's multi-layered learnings that I would say happen through this program that weren't like things that we predicted or expected, but clearly are really impactful. And I think all play a role in like, how do we work together as a community to like, be good roommates, to actually like be like, functional folks who can live, indoors and in the healthiest ways possible. So we've done some pretty interesting exhibits. We did also one on the can and bottle collectors that was really extensive, but I'm always really impressed with our studio crew. Because my background is in arts and crafts, I love this space because I can come in and just like make art with my colleagues, and I'm not like seen as the boss lady. Like we're pretty equal in that space. And I would say like Ground Square is always trying to do that. We have a fairly flat pay scale. We really, we try not to be hierarchical as much as possible. And this has been like a really great space for us to experiment with, kind of flat leadership structures. So organizing, like I said, is a really important part of what we do. We are also affiliated with the International Alliance of Waste Pickers. It's a global trade union for workers in the informal waste economy. I have a part-time job with them supporting their advocacy work. So I've been able to get involved in things like the United Nations Plastics Treaty negotiations. I've learned a lot about like extended producer responsibility policies, which is the policy framework that is completely disrupting and changing the recycling industry right now. So we really have to understand them. And it's opened a door for a number of our members to actually get to travel abroad, places like Kenya, Geneva, Argentina, to meet other organizations, to see their work on the ground, and to organize together and just see like, how are you organizing and how can we learn about that here? So we're quite, I think because of these opportunities too, it's really enabled a lot of our members to get involved at the local level, on homeless related committees that the government sets up. Similarly, like recycling committees on the bottle bill issue. Like we really try to get our workers into those spaces to influence, because they bring a perspective that, those committees, especially in the recycling world, like they have not really had exposure to our workers, even though can and bottle collectors are a huge labor force that has gone totally ignored and misunderstood and not even really seen for a long time. Here's my contact information. I think with that, like I'd love to open it up for questions. Don't hesitate to reach out. if you want to ever, organize a tour and come visit our work in Old Town or in Southeast, like we welcome visitors. So yeah, happy to take some questions.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I think everyone here knows the routine. You raise your hand and you get a number. I don't see anybody on chat yet, but the Zoom people can put their name in chat or even put a question, short question that I could read. And let's go right to number one.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
I may have been asleep, but tell me what glitter is, and also what Senate bill you were so you needed, but I didn't get that either.
Great question. Do you mean what glitter means? Because it is an acronym. Yeah, and so glitter technically means ground score leading inclusively together through environmental recovery. And that was a title actually that we crowdsourced at one of our early meetings early on in the pandemic when we could no longer meet indoors at St. Francis. We were meeting literally megaphones on park benches at Overlook Park. And I have a distinct memory of one of our workers coming up with that acronym. So your second question.
Item, and I didn't hear that either, or maybe it was.
Yeah, Senate Bill 992. Essentially, it designates alternative redemption, which is what we do, and it enables us to apply through the OLCC to have what's called a convenience zone. So it allows us to, within 3 miles of our future new site, all of the retailers within that 3-mile radius can opt to pay in to our depot, and as a result, they can take fewer cans and bottles. So this is more or less how the bottle drop system works. But it allows us to operate in that way as well. So it gives us funding not only from the distributors, but also from the retailers. So that will enable us to afford to, expand our hours. It did pass. Yeah, so now we've been in the process. There's a private buyer bought a building that we will be moving into. So now we're just going through all the kind of zoning, permitting, and neighborhood engagement stuff, which I'm sure you can imagine is really fun. People have a lot of concerns about can and bottle collectors, but I think it's also a great opportunity for us to educate and kind of share who canners really are. Yeah.
Okay, number two.
Good morning. Portland just came up with $120 million worth of money that was designated for homeless, whatever, all kinds of that kind of work. Are you positioned at all to take advantage of this or hit them up for some of that money?
I hope so. I don't really know how they spend that money. Those are all kind of fresh numbers, and we'll see if that's the final number because it seems like the number just keeps climbing. Yeah, it's rather shocking when you see how many people are living on the streets. I mean, obviously, they need to spend that on affordable housing and get people into housing first and foremost. And I don't know if what gets allocated for us this year will come from that budget at all. That will, we'll probably find that out coming up, in June when they do make all the budget decisions and stuff like that. But if not that exact money similar to it that is allocated to housing issues will be given to us.
Renovate the Lotus Center. Way up.
Yeah. I don't want to get too political here with y'all today, but obviously we would really like to see that money be prioritized to housing.
Okay, a question. Zoom, Hank Robb asks, how much does it cost to run the washing facility each month?
Well, it depends on how much we can really operate. I mean, right now we're down to such bare bones. We're working 2 half-day shifts a week, we have to do it 2 days just so people can get their laundry after they've, not have to wait a whole week to come back and get their laundry. We're hoping for about $150,000 allocation to get us through, a year. That will give us a good number of shifts so that the workforce development aspect is really in place. That's, for a year, over a year, not a month.
Okay, number 3.
I can remember the reuse model used to work in America, but it doesn't anymore. Goodwill used to solicit repairable goods. Now they don't repair the stuff before they sell it to you. Do you see that working in other countries better than it works here?
You know, I will say that like in Europe, through their circular economy regulations, increasingly through, you know, they employ a lot of extended producer responsibility policies in Europe. We're seeing more push towards reuse, but not as much investment as we need to get us where we're going quickly. And a lot of times, you know, it might incentivize producers to kind of just take back and repair their own, but that money doesn't really get distributed to community actors that are also really instrumental in the reuse system. So this is part of the reason why we get so involved in it, is because we want to see not just is the material getting recovered for at least recycling, but ideally reuse. But, you know, are small businesses, are nonprofits also benefiting from some of the opportunities there? So, you know, no, I don't think that there's enough investment happening in reuse, particularly in the United States, Canada, Europe, you know, the countries that have the biggest markets and really need to be. Not yet, but we're pushing for it.
It's work in those countries where you talked about this free vendor.
Yeah, I mean, you go to some place like India and there's an incredible amount of still happening. I think our biggest challenge there is like sometimes the investments that go into reuse systems are completely overlooking the existing ones. Like India, there's a movie called The Lunchbox that's really great because it highlights in detail the tiffin, like the reusable lunchbox service that, you know, is like has existed in India for a really long time. And a lot of times, you know, I mean, they should really be investing in sustaining an existing system that's working very well, right? But I'm not seeing these types of policies really invest in protecting those systems. You know, now you might get little startups, middle class kind of startups trying to do something like that, but they end up being kind of one-off things like we see to some degree here in the United States as well. You know, we need to have mechanisms to support those small businesses, but particularly in places where they already exist, like protect what's working. So, you know, those are definitely things that we push for. The International Alliance of Waste Pickers this year and next year, it's like top of our agenda is looking at reuse. We're doing a whole series of studies on the subject of reuse and how that could work in a way where waste pickers can still be involved in those systems. So I'm happy to, you know, as those start to be published to, you know, share them with your group or whatever, if you're interested in reading more about what we're looking into. But, you know, what we have found through those studies is that there's actually a lot more reuse happening than we realized. Like we did a study on Ecuador, and waste pickers are doing an enormous amount of reuse there, but because they're really only getting paid for the recycling, they're only documenting the recycling. So they might have really good numbers on the tonnage of recyclables, but they didn't really have any recording of what they're reusing. So yeah, we're also trying to document what's existing that we just don't know about yet.
Okay, are we on 4?
You mentioned that we could come and see what you're doing, see your site and that sort of thing. I called Metro Recycling, I don't know how long ago, and asked if I could come and do a tour of their facility. I got a long rigmarole about how I could take a 3-month course, and after that, if I came, I would sign up for something else. I don't remember exactly what the rigmarole was, but are they trying to keep something from us? Are they really throwing a lot of that stuff away?
My guess is that they probably just get a lot of requests to do that, and they probably referred you to the Master Recycler program. I'm guessing it's, yeah. My guess is that they just get a lot of requests. You know, we know that too. Like if people are interested in seeing our garbage, it can be really hard to see waste sites in the United States. I mean, there's even like to get a tour of a landfill is not that easy in this country, whereas in a lot of places you can just kind of walk up and see. So yeah, my guess is that it just is more of a matter of capacity, and they need to have a staff there who's, you know, making sure that you've got hard hats and it's a safe scenario and everything. I've heard the Master Recycler program is really good. In fact, Chris, who manages our depot, next week will be getting his certificate as a Master Recycler. So he did get to visit the site.
Okay, another question from Zoom from Kurt Mackey. Is there a dynamic to the General Services Administration employment approach that makes it better to work with GSA than to go it alone on the street?
Can you read it again?
Okay, is there a dynamic to the General Services Administration employment approach that makes it better to work with that than to go it alone on the street?
Okay, so I think, yeah, maybe the question is like, is there a real benefit from like, moving from being a can and bottle collector in the street to like working as an employee for Ground Score? I mean, it's a totally different thing, right? I mean, folks who are collecting cans and bottles on the streets, some of them would really welcome a scheduled, payroll kind of more stable job, and some of them really wouldn't. So, I think one, it's about like choices and circumstance. We should be providing jobs for people who want scheduled, protected, formal jobs. Like we should, and I think that's one thing that Ground Score does and can provide. For folks who still need something lower barrier, who just aren't able to be consistent. We've certainly had our fair share of workers who like they might do great for a couple of weeks, and then they go through a period of illness or instability, and then they disappear. And so sustaining that regular work is really hard. And so for that reason, we're very committed to maintaining a depot, to maintaining kind of entry points, where people can commercialize recyclable material. But we're also always looking for opportunities like through our Ground Score studios where we can, open the door for folks who, may never really work successfully as a scheduled employee, but can have some opportunities to earn income informally. And then I think subsequently advocating, for informal workers in the informal economy to have more protections, make sure that they, have some support in accessing Oregon Health Plan or, food stamps or whatever it is they need to live well or better. I don't know if that quite answered the question, but I think it's different. Yeah, there's kind of two different lines. Thanks, Kurt.
Okay, number 5.
The terminology, garbage picker, and the guys that get on the bus 12 with giant bags of cans during commute time, those are kind of very negative images into a lot of people. And I think me, and then here you are, you don't look like a garbage picker. And all of a sudden I realized the guys with those giant bags of cans that take up all the room on the bus have a name. They're called canners. And they do a service for me. Yeah. And how can we just have any ideas of how Portlanders can recognize that these a lot of people are in a tough spot, but they're doing good things. I know what's my question. I'm sure. How can we change something? You've changed an image in my mind today. How can we do more of it?
Yeah, more of this stuff is like, well, I'm absolutely happy to get up on my Sunday morning and come speak to you all. Like, this is really important work. And like, the organizing itself, that creates a platform of just understanding and, being able to claim space as legitimate actors in the system. We've really had to fight for years to get money to operate a depot. Like, we don't even have a full-time depot still, right? We're 2.5 hours a day. And that's because of the structure of Oregon's bottle bill. A lot of other states have a handling fee. You can operate a depot as an independent actor. So, to some degree, it's fighting for policy to actually recognize us. It's about sensitization, especially with folks who may have never talked to a can and bottle collector. It's about getting our people in the media, on podcasts. Like, if you ever want Chris to come and talk to you, he's amazing, hearing his story. And I think those are the initial ways, but making sure that we have substantive, like formal ways of like being recognized in the system is also really important for us. I mean, even with our glitter program, every time there's a budget cycle, we're freaking out because, I know the county's going to have massive cuts this year. We don't know if our county funding is going to survive. If we don't get county funding, we're not going to be able to pay our rent in Old Town. Like, we need stability, not just for our people, but for the organizations that are serving them. And so, we're a fairly young organization, right? We were established in 2019, but we started out fiscally sponsored. So we're still pretty young and finding that like solid ground to not have to worry every budget cycle. But it shouldn't take us this long to get that sense of stability, I think. Thank you.
Question number 6.
So first of all, I'm a member of the Rotary Club, and I'm very familiar with the Rotary Peace program or scholarship program that Taylor went through. And I'm sitting here so proud of you and what you're doing. So listening to you. So thank you so much. The question. So you said March 5th, there's a gallery thing happening, and what time is that and where is that? I would love to attend that.
Good question. I should have put like, our poster will be ready next week. If you're on social media, you can follow groundscoreassociation.org, or you can look on our website. It's like pretty detailed, and you can find the Ground Score Studios program, and it gives you the address. It's 34 Northwest Cooch. So it's literally that corner. It's the southeast corner of Cooch and Broadway. You can't miss it. There's a big Ground Score Association sign out front. Yeah, it's 5 to 7 every first Thursday. Yeah. And thank you for your words. Yeah, I feel like I'm a pretty good poster child for Rotary because that scholarship was really transformational. So thank you for supporting that.
Okay, question number 7.
Hi, morning, Taylor. Question about Ground Score Studios art. Have you thought of extending that model at all to have a royalty type facility as another way of providing income for people and helping have art? That's fun.
What do you mean by royalty? Like
I can talk to you about that.
Yeah. It's a fairly new program, and we've been doing exhibits for just since last summer, and we didn't get that funding until last summer for it. So we had a little bit of a funding from United Way before that to feature Black artists specifically, because a lot of the artists who are drawn to that program tend to be Black and Indigenous. So it's, but yeah, we're just kind of experimenting with it and organizing. But I think, yeah, we're really open to more partners in it, or even organizations that want to partner and holding an exhibit together, but kind of thinking through the funding mechanism. I really don't know yet. Yeah. Yeah, I really welcome ideas on that. Thank you.
Back to Zoom, where Hank had a question that it got auto-corrected, and then he corrected his autocorrect. Regarding the material that is washed, do the finders keep it, or is some given away or sold?
We pretty much give it all away. We have really extensive community networks of, that take different materials. We have our own community closet that people can pick from. Sometimes we will pick it ourselves too, if we see it on the closet and it's something good. There's so much to go around. Kind of all of the above.
Okay. Question 8.
So much of this is in urban areas. Now, what about more rural areas, like in Eastern Oregon, where there's a lot of depressed economies and towns are turning into ghost towns? Is there any program, or do you know of any way of translating this or transferring this into a more rural setting?
That's a really good question, and so needed. I mean, even just the opportunity to recycle in rural areas is really inconvenient. We get a lot of inquiries about how to spread ground score here, how to spread it there, and we're just kind of trying to hold the things together here in Portland right now, in a very dramatically changing climate too. I think everything from all the way the federal down to local level politics have been a whirlwind. There's a new policy in Portland to be sweeping camps a lot and really, trying to criminalize people sleeping outdoors. So yeah, I would say we've been very tied up in just urban issues. We're always open, to talking to folks in rural environments, but we are really committed to an organizing approach. So it would be our preference that it's a local impassioned person who definitely either working directly with waste pickers in those areas. There's a lot of metal scrappers, I imagine, in more kind of rural environments have their networks. We also organize pretty solidly with our regional network in Canada and the United States. And so there's something called the North America Waste Pickers Alliance, or NAWPA, NAWPA.org. So because we were getting so many inquiries, we actually opened that website, and it has a little bit of a toolkit embedded on there as to here's how we did it, here's how you could, and it's got examples from all 4 of our organizations across the region to kind of help give some ideas and hopes, because we really want to spark this work all over the place, ideally. We just don't really have the capacity to do it ourselves, at least not at this point.
Number 9.
Hi there. Thank you so much. Very good program. I was wondering, do you have an office with an address? I have 3 questions short. And I was wondering the name, waste or ground score, where does that come from? And then is there a place for volunteers, like coming in on a day shift?
Great questions. I know, I didn't even know our name, Ground Score Association. Well, ground score is it's a kind of a common term in the streets. It's like anything that you find on the ground that is valuable to you. But we kind of think about it as people too, like, you know, we scored with a lot of our employees. We've got amazing employees, so we kind of scored with them. So we think of it as, you know, anything that you find that brings value. We do have an office. It's a warehouse. It's a pretty industrial feeling warehouse with a lot of ground scores, things that we found decorating it. And it is at 624 Northwest Cooch. 624 Northwest Cooch. You can find that address on our website, 97209. And yeah, it's attached to the gallery. So that 34 Northwest did I say 34 Northwest Cooch? It's 34 Northwest Broadway is the gallery. And then the Cooch, so we have 2 separate entrances, but it's all the same warehouse. Yeah, we're always open to volunteers. I mean, we've always been so labor focused, like we like work to be paid. But, you know, we have definitely taken on volunteers, especially who have, you know, different skills that we can plug into or who are able to mobilize. Sometimes like in the summer when it's really hot, we'll try to get together some hygiene kids or cooling kids. We've enlisted like sewing volunteers, have started doing like sewing classes for some of our workers. You know, I think just it depends on your skills, but we're always open to more volunteers. We don't have a volunteer coordinator most of our money goes straight to workers. So, you know, we're a little bit thinly staffed at the top, hoping to close some of those funding gaps this year and have a proper volunteer coordinator.
And number 10.
So you mentioned the right to a healthy and clean environment is a crucial part of your pitch, but it also seems as though the right to work and creating work is another crucial part of it. Has that argument been helpful in terms of gaining traction for security funding?
You know, your human rights. Yes, to work obviously is a really important one. You know, it's funny, the rights-based arguments for a lot of funders is like they don't really think about it that much, but I would say more and more, I mean, this year, you know, getting Plastic Solutions Fund money, and we also have Meyer Memorial Trust funding for the first time this year, and those are funders that are really focused on like movement building. So I think they understand like our rights-based approach. Those arguments have also been really useful at the international level. The International Labor Organization last year negotiated guidelines for decent work in the recycling industry, and myself and the president of our trade union were invited by the International Trade Union Confederation as like experts in those meetings, and so I got to see like participate in the tripartite negotiations that the ILO undertakes. And definitely there was like rights-based, I mean, the employers were trying to get all the rights-based language out of the text, but some was retained, and the right to work is absolutely essential. And even framing work as not just employment, but also like livelihoods more generally, because a lot of workers don't have an employer. And then how do you organize them, or how do you actually assign labor rights to somebody who doesn't have an employer when they don't fit within the traditional trade union structure? So, for that reason too, we affiliate with the International Alliance of Waste Pickers. It's essentially a trade union for workers in the informal economy who oftentimes aren't, can't be represented by any other type of formal trade union structure.
Okay, I have, one more question. We got time.
I have, Metro gives us a bin for glass. And the person who comes has to pick through that carefully because a lot of them won't recycle. But the tin cans or aluminum cans, I just put right in the recycle. Should I have a separate bin for that for the waste picker? Yeah, I mean, certainly bottle collectors always appreciate if you keep it out of the bin.
you know, even just like a separate bag hooked on the side, or a lot of people will just put it in their glass bin. And then obviously you don't want to put aluminum in your glass bin, but if you know that it's going to be taken, you know, on recycling night, generally there's probably a canner in your neighborhood who's coming around. Yeah, separating it out, we always advocate for that. Especially keeping it out of the garbage, because that's, yeah. I mean, another thing that we advocate for is like unlocking public bins. Like there's been a huge trend all across the world, really, but like, you know, in the United States as well, in locking public trash cans. It's ridiculous to do that. You know, most of the time, if a trash can is spilling out over onto the sidewalk, it's because it's just overflowing, not because somebody has picked through it. You know, sometimes somebody might pick through it and not clean up, but for the most part, people do. They're not making big messes. And when you have a locked trash can, like you see these ones around the neighborhood now, like it's way more dangerous to stick your hand down into a dark hole than it is to just open and look in. And, you know, especially with as many people as we have living on the streets, there's some pretty gross stuff in those trash cans at this point. So we've done quite a bit of advocacy to get those bins unlocked. The city did unlock them for a while, but you know, a lot of times these neighborhood trash cans are first funded by like a neighborhood association, and they're like, no, we are locking this bin, like the city can't do anything about it. So it's a complicated issue.
I just noticed they took the trash cans apart recently. Is that just a seasonal for winter kind of? I've never noticed that before.
It may be a seasonal thing. It may be funding related. I mean, you know, they have to pay a contractor or somebody, pay a company to go and provide those services generally. So I don't know what that's about. Are you talking about here at Wallace Park or? Oh, interesting. Okay. I'll ask about that.